Wade, I have something.
I heard Brenton saying that he had something for members' interest, if he's recommending.
Okay. Yeah, please go ahead.
All right, so last week we had our second annual I Can Bike Camp. So we had 25 riders over 5 sessions, and we had about 54 volunteers help support the camp. So it was really successful. For those of you who don't know, I Can Bike is a 5-day camp that helps children and young adults with special needs and disabilities learn how to independently ride 2-wheel bicycles. So it's a very successful camp held at the UACDC, and it was a great week. And thank you to Mike Disco for volunteering.
Anytime you need me, I'm here.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, Jonathan Forbes here. There was a study that there's an advocacy group called People for Bikes, if people are familiar with that, and they just released their city ratings. And I know sometimes this committee's interested in the progress that we're making with the efforts and the plans that are developed. And just from a reporting perspective, they rated the city of Tampa from a community, which includes safety, awareness, network, and ridership, as a score of 48 out of 100. That may not seem too well, but the average score was 24. So that's a positive. But on the alternative is the network analysis, which is the connectivity and all that. The score for Tampa was 13, where the average was 25 out of 100. So a lot of work still left to happen, but at least it's a positive trend.
So there was 2 different categories that they looked at in terms of those 2. How do we rate with some of the other cities in Florida?
Well, as far as a large city, we were 69th out of 89. And overall cities, there was 1,105 cities measured, and Tampa came in at 616. So in the 44th percentile. I don't have what it was last year.
Okay.
But I know we're always interested in the measurement of if we're moving things forward or not.
What report was that again, John?
People for Bikes.
People for Bikes, thank you.
Yeah, I like to track it on a website called Walk Score. They also have a bike score.
They do that.
In transit, and they do rankings to compare the different metro areas. Good one.
So, thank you.
Yeah, Jonathan. So I also just had a thought I wanted to bring up to the group. It was related to a couple of meetings ago. We had that meeting where they were discussing the new way of making up the MPO board. And we didn't have a quorum at that time, but that just seemed like a really important agenda item. It seemed to me that they were putting more of the power of that board into the hands of the voters by restructuring it and removing some of the professional organizations' voting power. So I was just wondering if you had an update or you know where that is.
They did take it back to the full board, and I do not think there was any, I do not think there was any consensus in favor of removing the agencies like the Airport Authority, Port Authority. We have HART, the school board, and there's one other that Expressway Authority. Yeah. I think there was a lot of interest in maintaining the professional staff and organizations on there, and they do play a large part in our organization. So that has gone back to the drawing board, and in the next couple of months, once we have something else, they will be bringing it back through committees to see. So, and this is the reapportionment, which happens every 10 years as a result of the census for MPO and TPO boards throughout the country. So everybody's on the same. Thanks.
So none of the other boards passed motions to support that realignment?
I will have to bring back what if there were any actions by any of the committees to support or not support that. But when it came to the full TPO board, there was certainly not a majority to approve removing any of the existing board membership.
Oh,
wouldn't expect them to vote for that.
But there wasn't a majority even among the elected officials to do so. So
They're looking for cover for their bad decisions.
I can't speculate on their motives.
Okay. Well, that's disappointing in my personal opinion of it, but let's see what they come back with. Okay, so any other members' interests?
Jim Sharp. Just want to mention the Walk Back Town event that Christina Costa managed for us with the people from League of American Bicyclists. I forgot what was name, but they came down and did an event. And then Janet Sadiq Khan, formerly the Commissioner of Transportation in New York City, did an event at Tampa Theater. It was really cool. She's an advocate of pop-up infrastructure. She's the one who put all the tables and chairs in the middle of Times Square to prove that you really didn't need to let cars go through there. And it was very successful, and it's still there.
Jim?
Yeah, that's it.
Anybody else? Anyone else on the line?
Mike Disco, I also attended that event that Jim was talking about with Jeanette Sidicon. I was able to connect with Michael Rowe of NATCO. I haven't been able to talk to him lately because he's such a very busy individual, but he's interested in doing some work in Tampa as well as Jeanette. I was able to speak with her for about 5 or 10 minutes after the event, and she also signed my book. So I have a book, and I'm researching some of the things that they've done for New York as well as other cities implement infrastructure, not only for bicycles, but for pedestrians also. And wanted to see, coming from someone who rides every day the four corners of the city of Tampa, what can we do to help implement more infrastructure? I know we have Tampa Moves and Vision Zero, FDOT, Florida Bicycle Association. But my question to panel and anyone else that's listening, how much do you really ride in Tampa, and do you ride not only downtown, but like rural areas, maybe Suitcase City, Town and Country, South Tampa, the kind of those areas? Because some areas are popular and then some areas are not so popular. I don't hear too many people talking about them. The area that I'm in, which is like around the outskirts of Temple Terrace, Bush and 50th, is a real major problem. I've been in this area for 2 years and recorded over 14 crashes. 2 crashes recently that happened where individuals died on Bush. So I wanted to see what can we do for streets like Bush, Del Mabry, Gandy, Bloomingdale, so on and so forth. And what can I do to help implement some of this infrastructure too?
It's not going to take that.
Please, sorry, we need you.
Mike, that's a really good point. Bush has come up several times. A lot of these 6-lane, higher speed, 4 and 6 and 8-lane, higher speed arterial roadways. Several of the ones you mentioned are state roads, and they handle a lot of the volume. They have a lot of the safety issues and are very tough ones to deal with. Some of them, and I'm not sure that every road you mentioned is on it, are in our top 20 and top 50 Vision Zero corridors, which we are working through. We've done planning studies on several of them and are trying to prioritize those for safety and other funding sources to make those changes. We know just how dangerous so many of our roadways are. We have very limited funding, and we do try to prioritize the most dangerous roads for those upgrades. And we try to do as much as we can when we are doing things like resurfacing or other needs like digging up a road for a water line or a sewer line or a stormwater line as well. I think one of the presentations we have tonight with Mr. Hardy will talk about how they do some of that with maintenance things. But if there are any corridors you would like me to pull crash numbers on and let you know how that compares to other unsafe corridors in our county, I'm always happy to do so. But the area you were talking about, 50th Street and 56th Street, has a study going on right now with through Kittleson and Associates, and they will be coming back to us in the next couple of months. Bush Boulevard has had several improvements. The Hawks being the latest one. That's the overhead crossing pedestrian hydrant beacons. But what are we doing about it? That is a longer conversation, and I look forward to having it with you. But it's ultimately it's a funding issue, that there are a lot of safety issues and not enough money to deal with all of them at once.
Okay.
Understood. I understand that it takes funding, and I also understand that it takes a while to implement some of these things. I was also seeing maybe we could try to reach out to the public and have them aware of these things to try to possibly slow down. I mean, not everybody's going to comply, but to get a few people to comply would be better than none. And also, I wanted to mention that I've looked at several things as far as research, and like those research companies that you're talking about. Maybe I could work with them somehow, because there's a website and a company called Cyclique where they offer you to record crashes, and they offer a light fixed with a camera, one in the front and one in the back for cyclists. So that would be possibly, if you can look into that, a good way to really get research, because you'll be right on the ground. You'll be right there, eyes and ears of a cyclist, what they go through, and see what pedestrians go through in those areas. Probably will give you a little bit more in-depth research is what I'm saying.
I think that's a great idea. Did you say Cycline?
It's pronounced Cyclique with a Q at the end.
CYCLIQUE?
No Q, no UE, just a Q.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Mike, it's Jim Shirk. One thing I wanted to mention is the improvements on Bush are sort of mirroring the improvements that were done on Fletcher a couple of years ago. And
Correct.
the improvements on Fletcher reduced the crashes by something like 40%. They significantly reduced the major crashes, for sure.
The severe.
But there was a fair amount of public outreach on Fletcher, a lot of interviewing of people. I was wondering if maybe there's some way that Mike could get involved in that.
And that was a Cutter project. I know Christine Williams from Cutter is on the line, although that wasn't her project.
Okay.
But I can certainly, I think as individual projects come through, Mike, you'll hear about them in this forum. But there are opportunities to get involved, particularly, I mean, they're sort of at the tail end of it now, but the 50th, 56th Street one, I know they would love to hear from you about your experiences there. But there are always studies going on with the city, county, and FDOT on various roadways. And anything that either comes through this committee, or even if it doesn't, if you have some interest in it, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll do my best to show you what's going on if you want to talk about it.
Sure, I'll definitely do that.
And Kelly here, I'm with the City of Tampa. If I could put in a plug on our tpamoves.org website right now, we have our draft bicycle routes. So we kind of classified where we have protected, where we're planning to have protected. So if everyone could just take a look, it's open. You can leave comments if you see something that's missing. We're calling out where we have crossings that, are protected and places where we need to look at making crossings safer and more protected. This is definitely the time that we are actively looking for more feedback on it. So if you have a couple minutes to just leave a comment, it's pretty interactive.
What is
Okay.
TPAMOBES.org, and it should be like the second panel on it.
Thank you.
Mike, this is Tim Horst. I also have a point of discussion as far as something that we could do that would help safety and just advance the transportation infrastructure we have in the city. I believe in November, we're having the half-cent sales tax come back up for transportation.
Right.
What's it?
1 cent, okay. The 1 cent. And that right there will kind of single-handedly provide a lot of the needed funding for the city and the county and, you know, various municipalities to actually fund these projects and get them ready. So I think both voting for it and advocating for it to our people around us, friends and family, I think that can go a long ways to helping get that passed.
Okay, yeah, I kind of already started advocating for the tax. A few recordings that I put out on social media, that's pretty much how I get it out. And then I'll be able to talk to some friends and all that, because the more people that we can get to vote for that tax, the better off we'll be. I mean, basically, without that tax, Tampa would be dead.
Yeah, it'll be status quo, basically.
Yeah, yeah. So
Right.
yeah, so we need to campaign and push for that tax to come in November.
Absolutely. All right, anybody else, members' interest? All right, hearing none, we can go ahead and go back to the roll call and declaration of quorum. So, Gail, we do have the quorum now. Would you like to add to that? So we'll just proceed in the order of the agenda.
Yeah, Gail.
Who is here in person?
Yep.
No, who showed up in person to establish quorum?
Oh, yeah.
As well as Robin Baker, Kelly Fearon, Jonathan Forbes, Sally Thompson, Katrina Corcoran, Victoria Klug, Jim Shirk, and Tim Horst.
Okay, great. Chair, would you please call for a vote of consent for remote participation?
All right.
I move that we permit online participation.
Second,
Sure.
Sally Thompson.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right.
That's to let the online people vote tonight? Are we voting on anything?
Just an amendment to the public participation plan.
It's fine. I mean, I just, effort. Make an effort to be here in person because of that quorum that you need, right? So you can either be in person or online. Okay. All right, it's good to know.
But if we don't have enough people to make a quorum, we can't vote on anything.
That's
But you
right.
can have people at a quorum in person or a combination of in person and.
No, we
it
have
has
to
be
have
a
enough
quorum in
people
person.
here.
But the people who can't attend can then vote. We can then make it, then we can vote.
Open to everybody. So you have to have a quorum in
Yes.
person, then you have to, sorry,
Yes.
because I just learning all
That's
the
okay.
procedures.
Better to ask questions than.
They keep changing too.
So if you have a quorum in person, if you don't have a quorum in person, nothing's going to get voted on.
Right.
So if you have a quorum in person and you want to let the people on, is it important to have the people online vote?
Well, it's good to let everybody chime in, we want to have participation.
Yeah, that's fine. It's not a big deal. I was just wondering, it seemed like it was one or the other, but
Is there a way, if I answer this way, that we are ensuring that we reach the quorum every time?
Yes.
Well, he texted me at 5 o'clock and said, I need you here. I was.
And yes, we had somebody drop off sort of last minute, which is okay. People have, we don't want people coming in if they're sick. We would like for people to, do what they feel comfortable with, but under state law, we sure have to have an in-person quorum, which for this committee is 9 people. And you know, in fairness, I understand your points about making an effort to be here in person, and I get that. But yes, every week or every month rather, I try to send out an email asking, and if I don't hear back from people, and if I don't get 9 on that list, that's when I start bothering things like that.
Okay.
And thank you for responding to me without prodding. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I
Okay.
think we
Cool, thank
could
you.
plan to have 10 every week, just that way in case someone's running late or something comes up. We
I
don't
think
have to.
I think that's a great idea to try for 10.
Because I know I was running late today myself, and I don't want to have any one person feel like they're holding up the whole group. So,
Right. Yeah.
okay. Moving on. Minutes. Yep. Item number 5, the approval of minutes from May 25th, 2022. Comments? If not, we can get a motion on that.
I move we approve the minutes as printed.
Tim, it's Peter Davitt.
Go ahead.
In the minutes, last month you discussed about a bike ride on Ola, O-L-A. The minutes list that as Lola, like the girl or a woman. You know, is it important? No, but is it technically wrong? Yes.
Thank you, Peter. We will make that correction.
All right.
You want to start being low.
Yeah, good catch, Peter. Thank you.
Jim Turk again, I move that we approve the minutes as corrected.
Trina Corcoran, second.
All right, Jim Shirk with the motion, Katrina Corcoran with the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
I'll do the online, so now all online people say yay.
Yes.
Yes. Yay.
And all opposed online? All right, hearing no opposed, the motion passes. So just for the online people, I'm gonna go ahead and I'll do a specific one for you guys afterwards, just that way we can make sure we hear you.
Okay. That works.
Mr. Rank, I'm going to make you the presenter if you're ready.
Actually, Christine Williams will be the presenter of the PowerPoint presentation. I'll have like a little bit of it at the end, but she'll be running the PowerPoint. I'm just here to introduce her and follow through at the end. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
Yep.
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for moving me up on the agenda. I really appreciate that. We've been talking to all the committees about this. We are, and I should say who we are. I am Richard Rank from the Hillsborough County Community and Infrastructure Planning Department. And we, the Community and Infrastructure Planning Department, are in the process of updating the Corridor Preservation Plan. It was last updated a whopping 13 or 14 years ago. It's definitely past due. It's a key component in terms of knowing what the future needs of our facilities are. So in anticipation of that update, which we'll be coming back to you on, we completed a corridor planning and preservation best practices study. That study was provided insight and guidance on the current state of the practice in Florida, best practices within the state, also best practices nationally, focusing on multimodal corridor planning and preservation. So the recommendations included in that study help provide guidance on future corridor planning needs. To talk about that study, which was conducted by Cutter, the Center of Urban Transportation Research at USF, is Christine Williams. She directs the Planning and Corridor Management Program at Cutter. She's a multimodal planning specialist, transportation and land use policy analyst, and national authority on access management. Other specialties include corridor preservation, which is what we're talking about right here, multimodal planning, which is also part of this whole endeavor, transportation equity, thoroughfare planning, and land use and transportation policy. All of these things work into this whole process. So with that, Christine, if you're there, it looks like your presentation is called up. Go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Can you all see the proper view? Hello?
I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, good. And it's all set. Okay, thank you. Having a little bit of internet issues here today, so let me know if you have any issues hearing or seeing the screen. Thanks, everybody. And as Richard mentioned, the goal of the study was really to look around at some of the multimodal best practices around the country and give some, as well as the legal context for corridor management in Florida, and give the county some guidance in updating its corridor plan. And we certainly found that the legal context in Florida is very strong. It continues to be. And with the multimodal changes to Florida planning law that were passed in 2011, there's a lot of potential there for advancing what we're seeing in contemporary thoroughfare plans, which is a much stronger emphasis on complete streets, grid networks, and context-sensitive design, as well as some ideas of network redundancy, connectivity, which we know are important for a variety of reasons. And we also looked at some of the resiliency issues and technology to see how that might be integrated. So I'm going to touch on 4 key areas today that we found, starting with area type and context. And that really looks at the complete streets idea. And Fort Worth, I thought, personally was a leader in that. Their master thoroughfare plan, which is a regulatory plan, was completely grounded in a complete streets philosophy. And they built modal elements into all of their street cross sections. And because it was also a regulatory plan, they had detailed procedures to provide for flexibility in the administration of it. The way that they did it was defined in, although some of the corridor plans we reviewed specified area types, they built that context into their street types. So they define different street types, like activity streets, which are your pedestrian active streets like you might find in a downtown environment with sidewalk cafes, as well as different types of streets, like even the commercial connector, which is more of a commercial strip with off-street parking. So these street typologies were mapped, and they took their whole series of maps that they had developed through the planning process or other modal agencies had developed to build out the thoroughfare plan. And so they started with the street type, number of lanes, transit. Is this a dedicated transit lane type of facility, or are they running BRT on the median and that sort of thing? Median, what type of median? Is it a two-way left turn lane or a standard median? And they had some technical criteria for determining these different things, the types of parking on street or not, and bicycles, which is your interest, and what type of bike facility. Was it a shared lane? Was it a separated bike lane? A side path, a buffered bike lane? And again, they had some criteria for making those decisions in terms of the type of bike lane that they would put in there, and looked at different types of corridors as well, building in roundabout corridors, aesthetic corridors, and so forth. So they took all this information and coded it. And this code applied throughout the community to those street types. Like, for example, the neighborhood connector is what you're seeing here. I hope you can see that. It's maybe somewhat small. And the number of lanes. This one didn't have a special transit facility, but it did have a separated bike lane, and all of that implied a certain right-of-way width. And there was description of the street types as well associated with it. And as I mentioned, it's important to have flexibility in application of these types of codes. Often the width on some of these established thoroughfares won't accommodate all the elements. And so in these cases, they might have to reduce the elements or eliminate them depending on the priority. So they have some modal priority associated with some of these routes. Of course, they do update them periodically, and then they also might allow amendments, waivers, and even exceptions were established for certain types of special streets. Kind of turning to Indianapolis, Marion County's thoroughfare plan, which they adopted as part of their comprehensive plan, transportation element. It was an optional element, just like we have in Florida for corridor management. And it was more of a long-range guide, a little bit less specific and regulatory, but still quite instructive. And let me just walk you through some of the aspects of that. So they had two area types, compact and metro, which would be your more typical suburban environment. They use your more typical roadway classification typology, not quite as creative as Fort Worth. But they did have some others in addition to these that were designated for off-street greenway trails or shared use paths that they use, the Beltline Rail Corridor and the Greenway Corridor. And so here are your typical road types. And then they took this information, and depending on the number of lanes this future plan called for each of these facility types, they'd have a minimum and maximum right-of-way width that's established that kind of carries through in terms of the different modal elements that they're calling for. So a 2-lane primary arterial in a compact urban area, would have that utility area, the sidewalk, transit shelter area, a landscape buffer, protected bike lane, and then they carry it out in terms of the full right-of-way width that they might have. And that's all specified in their road right-of-way standards and design guidelines as prototypical cross sections for each of these types of facilities. Broward County Planning Council has been doing this for many, many years, since the 60s really, but only more recently, I forget what year it was, did the MPO and others adopt Complete Streets guidelines. And so many of the communities in Broward County now are interested in carrying these out and identifying routes within their community that might benefit from more detailed treatment and multimodal options. They designated 3 area types for Broward: urban core, urban Main Street, or urban residential. And here, this is an example of the city of Pompano was interested in a segment that would be a complete street or context sensitive corridor, they call it. And they submitted a special right-of-way plan for that to guide the future cross-section design. And that was then adopted by the Planning Council and implemented. Here in the city of Bastrop, Texas, Texas has a history of thoroughfare planning. We already saw Fort Worth, but I thought it was interesting to show you this small city where they basically establish what you might call a master street plan and land use regulations that are calling for this very detailed street grid as a framework for future growth, to create a more compact development pattern, primarily due to flooding and wildfires and other issues that were in the area. And so this is really a resilience type of plan that they adopted. It might be interesting to do something like this in the community plan areas of Hillsborough County, because many of those communities have expressed a desire for a town center, and could potentially adopt something to this effect. We've got this concept of right sizing now in areas planned for urbanization. You might need a thoroughfare network with more alternative paths than has typically been provided, that does allow the network to be more resilient to changes in traffic and traffic incidents. But it also, from your perspective, it can also allow for reduced cross-section widths and make it more conducive to non-auto modes, the network. And so you can reduce the number of 6-lane arterials that are causing some safety hazards. So what they do is they overlay an ideal grid onto an existing area and then modify that grid to try to look at what might be some priority routes that they could build out. And in this case, they're showing Utah County, Salt Lake City urban area, and the existing pattern, which is rather sparse in terms of the thoroughfare network, and how they might be able to try to build in some other priority options, and they then prioritize them by urgency. So that is another idea. Indian River County includes what they call an extended roadway grid network map. And that's in their thoroughfare plan to provide for logical extensions of the roadways to undeveloped portions of the county. And they also enforce a subdivision collector map to ensure that proposed development will extend subdivision collector roads to landlocked parcels. And so that does create quite a nice grid network in Indian River. And they talked about that as being really helpful to their transit system. And kind of looking into the future, we were asked to do that as well. And we are seeing some of these smart road or smart corridor classification systems popping up. Certainly designating those high-tech corridors for new technology. And you can see here the autonomous car lane on this particular example would help guide those technology investments to those corridors and help identify routes where more right-of-way might be actually needed for that purpose. And so some interesting information along those lines. Similarly, the plan could designate electric corridors and anticipate the need for electric vehicle charging stations in certain areas of the county, particularly where they would involve the need for additional right-of-way. So there are some gaps in the system. FDOT has already identified theirs, but are there gaps within then at the local level as well that might be built out to help incentivize the use of electric vehicles and reduce concerns about not being able to find a charge? Also, there's some resiliency work going on, the Tampa Bay pilot program study, for example, and those are starting to identify where are the vulnerable, the high vulnerability and high criticality routes in the region that might suffer in the event of extreme weather or storm surge due to climate change, sea level rise, and so forth. So one could associate some of those roadway segments that require mitigation and adaptation and additional right-of-way on the corridor plan map for future planning. And designating some alternate routes is very useful in the event of a incident, like a major crash or the need for evacuation. It just helps generally improve circulation to the local businesses and provide some redundancy in the network. So where are those routes that might benefit from parallel relievers? Like this one along US Highway 98, where they built out a roundabout corridor. So that's kind of the summary of recommendations, the integrated vision of the future system, classifying those thoroughfares along with the context or area type or modal accommodations that you want in those, starting to adapt the thoroughfare plan more to an idealized grid. I'm recognizing there's some of the opportunities have already been eliminated due to development, but what can we do moving forward as land uses change in some areas as well? And to anticipate new technology, and that dedicated funding source for corridor management projects and right-of-way acquisition is also another important success factor. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Richard, who's going to talk about next steps, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions for you. So Richard?
Thank you, Christine. Yes, so feeding into the corridor preservation plan are those recommendations. We have to remember the mobility element of the comprehensive plan and kind of fashion this multimodal corridor preservation plan to that. The fact that we want to build and maintain a system that supports the needs of all users with respects to ability, resources, identity, and mode preference. We could probably, readily admit that past plans were much more auto-centric. We want to label this as a multimodal corridor preservation plan. Next slide. So we've been developing a context classification system. We're all familiar with, or maybe most of us are familiar with, the traditional functional classification system of our roadways, arterials, collectors, local roads. Well, by using land use and policies and the concept of livable communities, will help us shape a context-based classification system, and we want to make sure that the corridor preservation plan considers this type of system when we are looking for right-of-way reservation for future corridors. It's not just a one-size-fits all for all arterials or all 6-lane arterials or all 4-lane arterials. We're looking at the context and the land uses around it for our preservation. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the process that we're going through for the corridor preservation plan. A lot of this, I won't go through each one of these, but we're in the process of just starting this. We're, looking at grid opportunities. We're looking at, what the network is and getting the information. This is basically beyond the long range transportation plan. So we're looking at a horizon past 2045 or 2050, which is the next long range transportation plan. So with that, when we develop scenarios, we want to look at, new technologies. How much will EVs and connected vehicles be integrated into the system? We're going to be considering those things, looking at, optimizing network redundancy, because with resiliency issues, things like US 41 are, do we need to consider alternative ways to get from point A to point B? So, and finally, this all will, culminate into, knowing what kind of right-of-way we'll need to set aside for these future corridors, and that's really what it boils down to, preservation of right-of-way for future corridors, not just autos, but other modes of transportation as well. Next slide, please. So this is our schedule. We've started already. This is a just over a year-long process. and we'll keep you all informed along the way, as seen in the public outreach section of this schedule. We are in the process of developing, our initial scenario, which, like the long-range transportation plan, is like kind of your base scenario. You get our socioeconomic data, get our network information, see how bad things are going to be in the future if nothing was done, and then look toward that and start doing some scenario building from there. As I indicated, we'll be looking at an extensive public outreach program, targeted stakeholders like homeowners associations, chambers of commerce. We'll be looking at focus groups and getting their input on how much new technology could be integrated into this plan. And we'll be coming back to the committees as well with a final product by April, hopefully, of next year. And I think that's it. Next slide. So if you have any questions, I'm here. John Patrick is my boss, and Christine can answer any questions on the best practices study. I put the link to the study in the chat. I think it was also included in the agenda as well. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Richard. You don't have questions or comments for Richard? Christine?
I did want to note that Richard put the link to the study in the chat.
It's also on the agenda.
And it's on the agenda.
This is Katrina Corcoran. Thank you, Christine and Richard. Just enjoyed the presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard, I got a question for you. Is something like this going to address the lack of grid network down in the South County area? I know it's been a concern I've heard before. People live down there.
Yeah, it's the whole county. So certainly South County is problematic in terms of this grid network that Christine referenced. It's a daunting task. One of the early exercises that we've done as part of this, even before we started this, was looking at opportunities lost. Like in the last corridor preservation plan, there are a number of 2-lane facilities, to try to promote a grid. Are those still viable opportunities to develop in the future? And unfortunately, because of maybe a lack of vision in policy or one reason or another, some developments have occurred that prevent some of those facilities to be built now. So we'll have to look at other opportunities instead. But it's definitely, definitely something we have to look at. And it may not be a corridor that's auto-centric. It could be, as we're trying to look at other modes of transportation, maybe we're, at the very least, we're looking at connecting neighborhoods with some kind of, pedestrian bicycle path that can at least accommodate some method of mobility to get people from point A to point B that doesn't require a car.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
Hi, this is Abigail Flores, Hillsborough County. I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. As for Richard and the team, so develop one of the, on your summary of process slide, it said develop scenarios that integrate new technology into the mobility system. So is this also considering, because we know, right, the technology that's coming with autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles and these type of things. What about the technology that surrounds multimodal, like e-bikes are becoming more and more popular. They travel at higher speeds than bicyclists, than even scooters frequently. So is this item capturing new technology for multimodal, like how to accommodate them in the mobility system?
They possibly can. I mean, part of our exercise is to go, I think in the schedule, we talk about focus groups, and we'll be having people that have working knowledge of technology in all forums. So as we go out as part of our public outreach, if something like that seems to be a viable scenario to be considered, then we'll consider it.
Oh, it's viable. They're everywhere. I mean, so it's definitely needed. If anybody's ever rode the paths, the trails, right? Hillsborough County has a lot of trails that connect with other counties, and so yeah, I've really seen an uptick. And I've heard in some regions that e-bikes are outpacing electric vehicles. So there it is. The other thing is, got it here, about, oh yeah, what about considering multi-benefit projects such as those multimodal projects that include, storm water capture and treating water? Because as we know, our region, there's a water crisis, right? Does anybody not know about that? There's a water crisis, there's increased development, and where are these drinking waters going to come from for people? So, the emphasis in this process is, do we want to emphasize multi-benefit projects, like when we're developing this networks, like when you have bulb outs, have recharge the groundwater, and just how we do, because drainage is facilitate is a part of transportation. So has that been considered, like multi-benefit projects?
Well, again, I want to stress that, the final product of this is a map that reserves a right of way for facilities, context sensitive facilities. So if something like that is beneficial to reserve additional right of way along a corridor based off of that context, that would be fine. If we're talking about bulb outs, or if we're talking about a nodal specific need for right of way, that could be a little more problematic for something that's as for a county-wide corridor preservation plan. But that's something for the public outreach process to be brought up, and for our consultant to consider.
Yeah, like, so when creating, your protected bicycle facilities, to have some kind of water capture recharge, like that barrier between the fast track and the driver lanes, so start to think about how else can this infrastructure is going in for the bicycle network regardless. So why not make it multi-benefit to capture stormwater, or to, these type of benefits. And the other thing is, how is the practice of selecting alternative roadway uses which support placemaking, bike lanes, and bike parking be incorporated into this update? So, there's the right of way is very competitive, as we know. So, these more dense communities that are coming into the county with high walkability, that's the premise, is high walkability. And is there going to be, like, capacity in this update to compare these competitive uses of the roadway? So instead of a parking spot, maybe a placemaking spot, and instead of a parking space, like a bicycle parking or scooter parking. Is there going to be that discussion in this update?
I think that might be getting a little bit more into the nitty gritty, but I mean, we have monthly stakeholder meetings to try to guide this conversation as to what needs to be a part of each of the scenarios that we're building. I think you're part of the stakeholder group. If not, you may want to talk to your boss about being part of the stakeholder group.
Okay, those are just the ideas that I wanted to, make sure we're thinking about as we're updating this, about the different needs that we have in our region and how we could address that, with this great update. Thanks for the presentation. Great info.
Thank you.
I might just add, this is Christine, that I did see a fair number of these corridor plans that are really thinking in detail about how those utility areas or those green spaces that run along the corridors are going to be used. And one of those examples was in Montgomery County, Maryland, where they had that designated space. So I think it is something that is considered in these thoroughfare planning efforts.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to make sure my mic was off. I just wanted to add in accordance with Richard and Christine and to the panelists that when you're implementing this infrastructure, there really isn't no way to not have places for parking for bikes, and have to also consider people with micro mobility, not just e-bikes, but you have one-wheel bikes now, you have fixed gear riders, road bike riders, you got skateboarders, people that roller skate. Those are all different types of form of micro mobility, whether with electronics or not, or people powered. So implementing bike lanes, we have bike paths, but they're not all connected in Tampa, and the majority of them are like kind of in the outskirts. There's a few here, like down Adamo Drive, there's one, but it stops at 36th Street. But from 36th Street going into downtown, it's pretty much well connected. So in the future, as they're planning in the infrastructure, they're looking for ways to connect these paths to where people with micromobility can move back and forth. I'm in touch with some people from Tucson, Arizona, which is the Living Street Alliance organization, and how they're planning their streets, as well as looking into the research with Janet Sidicon and her book Street Fight, where they show different cities like Copenhagen, Portland, and Oregon, which have already implemented a lot of this infrastructure and are implementing more.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think we really want to be planning for shared use paths and creating a network for micromobility for cyclists as a part of this right-of-way vision exercise that's going on.
Right. And I also wanted to say to Christine and Richard, if there's any way I can help with anything, just reach out to me.
Thank you. I mean, this is it's a daunting task. We're talking 40, 50 years into the future. I was really hoping for my jetpack by now. So, where's the parking for that? That's what I want to know.
Right. Because that is coming in the future, as Uber is now indulging into aerial taxis. I believe they bought their first one from Japan.
Yep.
Right.
As well as autonomous cars and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
All right, are we ready to move on to the next item?
Yes.
Heads nodding yes. So, yeah, Davida Franklin, please, you have the floor. You're going to present on the public participation plan amendment. And this is a action item. We'll vote on it.
Okay.
How about that one?
Yeah, that looks better.
Okay, thank you.
Is it from? Yes. There we go. Just need your. Thank you.
Are you down?
All right, good evening, everyone. I am Davita Franklin with the TPO, and I'm just going to present to you 2 amendments to our public participation plan. So this plan is something that guides all of our participation in terms of our engagement with the public. And oh, there we go. Okay, so you may have heard of this before. We have our measures of effectiveness report, which kind of looks at the 2 years prior to now and how we've done in terms of getting feedback from the public and engaging with them. And then the data from that leads us to amend the public participation plan. So what I want to do is kind of move forward here to the heart of it, which is this. And then I'll go back so you can see some of the changes in the verbiage of the public participation plan, which is also called the PPP. So here we have 2 items that we included in a pilot that we launched for the past year for TIP amendments. So on the left side, you have a Facebook post that also went out on our Twitter channel as well, which we did not do before for TIP amendments. So this particular post was put out there and also what we call boosted or targeted to folks who live in the area that is around the West River District, which is the north side of Riverwalk that is going to be improved. So just a little background, the TIP amendments, you know, that's our Transportation Improvement Program. A lot of different agencies are a part of that. And so when an amendment comes through, usually it's from the Florida Department of Transportation or FDOT. And it's usually when funding becomes available. So it's very important for us to put this out in the public as soon as we can to get some feedback on them. So the board, for you all to consider and also for the TPO board. So this one went forth in a way that had not gone forth before. So for TIP amendments, in the past, prior to this year, when we had an amendment that would come through, we would put a notice on our webpage, and then that was it. Here in this pilot, we actually put a dedicated webpage along with a Facebook post, which also was shared on Twitter, as well as on the right side, a road sign in the areas of the impact, closest to the impact of the project. And then we also put out a newsletter article or a press release. So these are now 3 additional practices in addition to the website page that we would put out there for amendments. So what I'm asking for you to consider is that we adopt verbiage in our public participation plan, and that's where these previous pages come into effect here. So this slide and this one as well, they talk more about what we will practice moving forward if you consider approving these amendments. It also talks about, if you look there, it says 2 weeks. So originally we had 21 days. We currently have 21 days to put out notice of a pending TIP amendment going up for approval. We would like to, for scheduling purposes, to make sure that it hits all of the committees in a timely fashion and also honors, in this case, or in most cases, it would be the FDOT's desire to push forth funding as quickly as possible. We would like to condense that into 14 days. And so what we did is we put those 4 practices into play, and we it wasn't even tripled. We hadn't gotten responses before from the public on TIP amendments at all. And now, over the past year, for 3 of them, we were able to get at least a dozen for each one. So that is a tremendous amount of increase just on 2 weeks of putting out information to the public in a way where we touch them in all of these different ways, whether it was online or in the street or on or through our website or in the media. So again, these pages here are, if you have access to the actual public participation plan, and on page 24, there we would like to change it to 14 days, so we can just hit them with those 2 weeks. Also here, it says again the 14-day period, and then here it talks about those practices, the social media posts, the website page. We also actually have on there, this came from public feedback. Someone in the public wrote to us and said, hey, we want to see more stuff out there. So our way to help that concern was to actually say that we're going to also put these amendments onto the media sites of different news outlets, such as the Tampa Bay Times and TBT. And then here again, you have where the verbiage will change to 2 weeks, again, with your approval, as well as, again, these practices that we said we can put into place. So it was quite successful. We got a great return on 3 amendments, and my request for you today is to approve the public participation plan amendments. So thank you. Do you have any questions?
When you put out that notice, it will always go out 4 different ways?
Yes, yes. And I cannot say more, and I'm excited about it, so I'm trying to contain myself, but it was so successful. We got, I mean, the way that we were able to just engage people on so many different platforms. So, so it's taking what we did, which was, again, the minimal, and really pushing it forward.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for doing that. Great presentation. Great to hear you get more public feedback.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so as an action item,
To approve the amendment to the public plan. Jim Sharp.
Jonathan Ford seconds. All right, and all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, now online, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, hearing no opposed, the motion passes. Thank you very much, Davida.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Mr. Hardy, I made you the presenter.
The floor is yours.
All right, let's see if I can do this. You'll hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. And then, are y'all seeing the presentation or the other, do I need to swap the view?
You need to swap.
All right. Y'all let me know. All right, now is it full screen?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right. My name is Cal Hardy. I'm the Capital Projects Manager and the Chief Design Engineer with the City of Tampa's Mobility Department. I work with Kelly, so good to see everybody. And I'm just going to talk briefly on how we implement Vision Zero through our maintenance program. So when Mayor Jane Castor took office, she came up with 5 key areas that she wanted to improve, and one of them was transportation. And as part of that, they formed a committee to kind of go through where we should focus our efforts. And the 5 recommendations were to implement strategic transit projects, focus on trails and greenways as transportation options, adopt Vision Zero as a citywide policy, reinvent urban parking and mobility, and enhance neighborhood engagement. So we kind of touch on all these with this presentation, but really we're focusing on the Vision Zero portion. The city does prioritize its projects through something called Tampa Moves, which is a 30-year framework to prioritize our projects and to figure out what we're going to do with our roadways and our corridors throughout the future. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there just to let y'all know where we were. Now, I have a question for the group here. Does anybody know what Salt and Peppa's, What a Man, and Whitney Houston, Jurassic Park, and Mrs. Doubtfire had in common? They were all hits the last time that the gas tax was raised, which was in 1993. So just for everybody, so everybody understands, gas tax is not levied cents per gallon. It's not, or it is levied cents per gallon. It's not a percentage of the price. So you only pay a certain amount per gallon. You don't pay, it doesn't increase as gas prices go up. It has been raised in 28 years, and it was last raised in 1993 from 14.1 cents to 18.4 cents per gallon. It's not pegged to inflation, which has risen 87% in that time. However, that figure is actually wrong because it doesn't accommodate or it doesn't include the recent inflation that we've seen over the last couple of years. And the purchasing power today is you basically get $1.95 for every dollar that you had back in 1993. So we basically limited our purchasing power by half, basically. In order to get back that purchasing power, our fuel tax would have to be raised to 34.4 cents per gallon. And then that's also not accommodating for electric vehicle adoption and fuel efficiency increases that we've seen over that time period as well. So one other thing is that we are projecting, because of those fuel efficiency and electric vehicle adoptions, a decrease in our fuel tax forecast. So you can see that we're actually looking at getting less money. I just read today that we might be on a 3-month fuel tax holiday if it goes through Congress. But that was something President Biden said today that he's in favor of. So at the same time, while we're having lower revenues, our roadways are actually experiencing more traffic. So in that same time period from 1993 to 2020, our trips have gone from about 3.7 million to about 5 million. But the big increase has been in single unit trucks, which have gone up 120%, and combination trucks, which have gone up 72%. The reason why I point those out is because what happens with pavement is as it ages, what really damages is actually the truck traffic. Truck traffic has an exponentially greater damaging effect on pavement than just regular single-use vehicle traffic. So as you go through, the more trucks that you have on there, the more your pavements get damaged. The older your pavement gets, the more likely it's going to get damaged. It takes less time to really go from fair to poor than it does from good to fair. And as your pavement continues to get damaged, the cost of remediation is exponentially more too. So like it costs a lot more to fix a poor road than it does a good road or a fair road. Right now, our local option gas tax allows for about $9 million a year. We use about 54% of that on street resurfacing, about $4.75 to $5 million a year. So we're putting the majority of our budget that we get. That's our only continuous every year source of budget is fuel tax. So we're putting the majority of that into pavement resurfacing. The other 46% is what we have for intersection improvements, movable bridges, seawall improvements, bridge rehabs, that kind of stuff. That 4.75 doesn't get us anywhere close to being what we need. We actually need about $22 million a year for our resurfacing program just to maintain the current condition of our pavement. Meaning, if we, right now our pavement on a grade, if you look at it on grade to 100, we're at a 64, which isn't terrible. It's actually in the fair range, is how they grade that. But just to maintain that 64, we need about $22 million a year. And in 2018, we did that same report, and we actually had a 71 grade, and we only needed 18 million. So you can see how in just 4 years, we've already added $4 million to that need. So if you look at all of our maintenance needs, including bridges, seawalls, and everything else, we need about $40 million a year, and our current budget is $5.4 million. And right now, we are actually on a 75-year paving cycle. So if you've seen your road get resurfaced recently, you won't see that again in your lifetime with the current funding levels that we have. So that's not the only problems that we have. We also, our roads are unsafe. Each year, on average, 44 people are killed and 290 people are severely injured. In 2021, we had 81 fatalities, 31 ped, and 6 bike included. In that same time period, San Francisco averaged 27 crashes with more than twice fatal crashes, with more than twice the population of our area. So you can see that we definitely have a problem with our streets. So as I mentioned, we have adopted Vision Zero, which is the goal to eliminate all.
Cal, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear us?
I can't hear him.
So
We left the
And the pavement condition index numbers to see if there are candidate streets that might need a little bit of help in both of those categories, and prioritize those streets ahead of other corridors.
Excuse me, Mr. Hardy?
Yes.
You cut out for about a minute and a half. You just came back.
Okay, where was I in here? These are pretty self-explanatory. So I'll just continue on onto this next slide right here, if that's okay with everybody for time. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, y'all give me a heads. I'll keep the chat open in case that happens again. All right, let me minimize them. Okay, sorry about that, y'all. All right, so when we do our maintenance projects, we can look for complete street opportunities. Some of the big things that we look to do is to design to our target speeds. That means what speed are we trying to get the road to operate at? We can do that by speed limit reductions, but that can't be the only thing, because those you need more than just a sign out there. So you can look at narrower lanes, enhanced signage and striping, horizontal and vertical deflection. We can also accommodate alternative modes. Our bike lanes are not just bike lanes, they're micromobility lanes. So I heard earlier there was some scooters and e-bikes and stuff like that. I saw a guy riding on Bayshore at 25 miles per hour on an e-bike the other day. I caught them in my car. Some bike parking, delineators and separators, conflict markings, and better transit accommodations. And that might just be as simple as moving a transit stop to where there's a crosswalk proposed. And then build for people. Add frequent and safe enhanced crosswalks. Add curb extensions and painted bulb outs, refuge islands, and raised crosswalks. So this is one of our roads that was recently done probably about 5 or 6 years ago, but this is High Park Plant Avenue. And you can see on the left, we just have one single stripe that is faded, but it's basically two 20-foot lanes that we had out there. So when we were originally going through our high injury network, I noticed that a lot of the roads that were on our high injury network were also on our resurfacing list, meaning they had pavement, or they were basically deteriorated sections that hadn't been resurfaced in ages. So when you think about that, it's not far stretched to think, okay, well, that might be because we've been using this road hasn't been touched in 45 years, and that road has 45-year-old design standards on it. It has 45-year-old context around that road. The area has grown up, and it was, parking lots, and now it's all multifamily housing or something like that. So what we try to do is reallocate the space that we have now and to delineate where everybody should go on the roadway. This is another project that we recently did on Davis Boulevard, and we do have a few things that we've done, a few of the things that we can add to a project. This is a curb extension. This little brick area is a curb extension. We kept the flow line of the gutter empty, so like basically we didn't have to do any kind of drainage features or add an inlet or anything like that. That made it a lot cheaper. You can see the bike lane with conflict markings. There's also a new crosswalk in the background there with an RRFB, a refuge island. We enhanced signage, and we added ADA accessible curb ramps. On the left picture is just a burn down. That's what they call those pavement messages. But that was a good, cheap way of alerting drivers to a crosswalk that was kind of invisible because it was around a really kind of shallow corner. So you couldn't really see it, but it does give you advance warning because you're not going to see the sign, but you will see the burn down. And then on Harbor Island, we added this bike lane to the Harbor Island Bridge and included the delineators as well. That gives you a bike lane, but also gives you a little bit more ease of comfort for people who are walking on the sidewalk, that the vehicles aren't right up against the curb there.
Yes, yes.
So Davis Boulevard, this is before, this is after. You can see the big difference there, and like where the delineation is, and there were no bike lanes, just really wide pavement. And then this is also on Davis Boulevard. This is a raised crosswalk that we installed with the project, and it does act to do some pretty good speed control. We installed these on Harbor Island, and this is a City of Tampa design that we kind of went against the standard on, and we made it a little bit more abrupt, and it has really helped out speed controls on that. And in fact, Harbor Island, we use this to replace speed humps or speed tables. So this is actually, and we haven't gotten any complaints on speeding since then. So they are working as well as the speed humps did in the past. This is another one that we did on Harbor Island. And then finally, I just wanted to bring up, it extends past our resurfacing projects. This is a rehabilitation for the Burbank Street Bridge. And right now we have 4 lanes there, but it's kind of dangerous to weave in and out of those lanes. And we realized we don't really lose any operation or capacity by combining the 2 middle lanes into a choice lane. So if you're riding in the middle lane, you can actually go, it's not shown correctly, but you can either go straight or left onto Bayshore. So when we were able to take out that lane, now we'll be able to widen the sidewalks on both sides of the roadway there, and actually add traffic railing between the vehicle space and the pedestrian space. So there will be an actual vertical traffic railing to protect pedestrians away from vehicles. And we were able to add some handrail to the outside of the bridge because it's very low right now, and it's kind of scary if you're riding the bike on that. But now it'll be higher, and it'll be very similar to what we have on the Riverwalk. So this will we'll be able to create a multimodal connection across the river by just rehabbing a bridge, which is much cheaper than building a pedestrian bridge. So on this project, this is a $13 million project, and we're still looking for funding on this because it was surtax funded. But this is $13 million. The changes in order to widen the sidewalk only accounted for about $300,000 of that. So when you look at the delta, you get huge benefits from very small cost increase. So it was kind of a no-brainer for us to do that. Just in general, our Complete Streets improvements add about 15% to the cost of our resurfacing projects. So all the medians, crosswalks, all that stuff is like an additional 15% premium on what it would just cost to redo the pavement and put back what's there today. So that's all I have. This is just our Vision Zero and Tampa Moves websites, and you can, Kelly mentioned this, so if you want to scan the QR code, it'll bring you right to the website. Sorry y'all couldn't hear me, but I'll open it up for questions now.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I've noticed the difference on Davis Island and on Harbor Island when I deliver Uber Eats on the bike, the bike lanes and the slower traffic, and people have been more attentive because what you have done. I just wanted to tell you that, hearing it from me, because I do ride these streets every day, and I do go down there to do Uber Eats and stuff. So the improvements are working. It is slowing down the traffic. People are seeing, and it does work better than the bumps, like you said, than the speed bumps. So yeah, I'm seeing it for myself.
Yeah, I think people like comply to them more, and they don't try to speed up in between them, because those speed humps were way too aggressive. They were almost, it was too much, and then people would just like try to make up the difference. Here they can kind of go at a slower clip, but they don't speed up in between. That's my theory, at least.
Right. Especially on Cass too. Cass was a problem street till you added the bike lane and everything. Now the only issue with Cass and the bike lane is that the apartment complex is there. People tend to park in the bike lane.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. They do, and maintenance vehicles and people there's tons of construction around that area by West Tampa, and there's a lot of vehicles in it too.
Cal, I know you said you were still looking for funding for some of these projects. Is there a time frame like for Broreen or any of the other ones that you mentioned?
So Broreen, no, it is completely designed.
Uh-oh, he went out again.
Cal, can you hear me?
No, he can't.
Okay. I'd like to go on record as saying that comparison to Tampa and San Francisco, in terms of the calendars, is really misleading. San Francisco has a transit network. More of the trips in San Francisco are by transit than by car. Transit is known to be safer. I would really, if you want to make a comparison, compare us to a similar sized city without transit. Wait, there aren't any.
Orlando, probably like
Yeah, maybe Orlando.
Jacksonville's probably a little. Yeah.
Anyway, got that, Cal?
No, I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
I was just finding about comparing Tampa to San Francisco when many more of their trips are by transit, not by more highly dangerous cars.
Right, I gotcha.
All right, any other questions or comments for Cal? All right, well, thank you very much, Cal. We appreciate the presentation. That was great. Sounds like you're making the best use of the money you do have, so we appreciate that.
Yeah, y'all let me know if y'all have any other comments on the any of the collectors that y'all ride on and stuff like that.
All right, so moving on, we're gonna go to next status report. All this new business.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to bring up next month's retreat or workshop, as we call it sometimes. Appreciate you all being interested in combining that with the Tri-County DPAC meeting. I think it's hard, particularly in the summer, to get people out to multiple evening meetings in a row, and we will have a much more efficient process with that. Having said that, I'm hopeful that you all will be in favor of, we try to move around the location of these, maybe do it somewhere outside. I believe last year we did it at the Julia B. Lane Park. A few folks were there, and that was a lot of fun. Trying to do it for the Tri-County meetings, we try to do it that is accessible for all three counties. And Cypress Point Park occurred to me because it is accessible to the Courtney Campbell Causeway. We could include it with a ride to the causeway and back, or however far we get on maybe the middle of the causeway if we can't make it all the way and back. And then maybe just having it at a pavilion, an open air pavilion at Cypress Point Park. I am also open to suggestions on location. I'm open to agenda items.
Do you have a date?
Yes, it is the date of our July workshop, which is the 23rd or 28th here. Let me pull it up real quick.
I think it's the 27th.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'll be in Scotland.
Oh, well, we'll miss you, but
July 27th at 5:30.
yes, although that time may shift a little bit earlier for a ride, even though we do have good evening sun. We can adjust that a little bit as needed. But if there are any ideas for discussion topics, I'm happy to take those now or via email, or same thing for location suggestions. So thank you all for your consideration on that. it's a great location.
Do I have an excused absence?
You do. Scotland gets you there. My parents just got back from the last.
Okay, all right, cool. That's that. Quick updates, and then, yeah, motion to adjourn. Sure. Thank you, everyone.
I hope this is the.